Welcome to AI Speed, the show where AI-powered companies talk about what actually works in the market right now. Business doesn't move at internet speed anymore. It moves at AI speed. And the people who figure out how to turn models into money will own the next decade. I'm Evan J. Chalfin, founder of Luxhammer and growth partner to High Performance Brands. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Giovanni Rossi, Chief Marketing Officer at Electra Vehicles. Giovanni is helping define how one of the most important shifts in energy is brought to market, that battery is no longer just hardware, but intelligent systems powered by AI and data. As CMO, he's responsible for turning highly complex innovation into clear positioning, scalable pipeline, and real commercial traction. Giovanni, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Evan. Very nice to be here.
Yeah, so you're operating at the intersection of AI, energy, and mobility. What drew you into this space and what made you focus on bringing something as complex as battery intelligence to market?
Yeah, so let me give you a little bit of background about myself. So I've basically worked all of my career across marketing, communication, and growth at the intersection of energy and technology, helping companies scaling internationally and build, sustainable business model. I started in consultancy, focusing on energy business model and international expansion across United States, Europe, and the Arab Gulf and India. After, I lived in Dubai for a while and in India. And, after that, I decided to come back to Europe and I joined a multi-utility group during, market liberalization. So I saw all the process about, transforming the energy market from a public market into a free market all around Europe. And that was a very interesting, situation to live in. And especially working for a multi-utility group. I grew a lot into the positioning, going to being a group head of marketing and communication and working especially on driving new innovation, new business model, new value proposition into the main, companies, the different organization and in a corporation, and also working on post-merger integration and new startup, selection and integration into the mother company. I found at this point the startup world to be definitely interesting and very close to what I wanted to do. And so I moved into my first startup. There was a General Electric backed company as CMO at Cleanwoods. And, we repositioned completely the business from an energy solution provider into an integrated energy solution provider for deploying technology, capital, and also resources to develop VPP, virtual power plant, and energy community. At that point, we had a very good, growth, and we had a very good exit, and decided to join Electra, focusing much more into the battery field, as I think basically this is the future. So right now we are in a race and an intersection of energy and battery. Battery is the technology that is needed to enable the energy transition, and it was very fascinating to start working on these topics. And I found it a very compelling value proposition to add the top layer of technology into this, as it is something that is completely missing, and it was completely missing. So that's what drove me to Electra and why I'm still here, working and supporting the value proposition and scaling, into different markets.
You mentioned right now it's a race. Are there other competitors that you're competing with in this race?
Yeah, we have a few competitors in the space. I think that the difference is they are very much vertical focused. So some of them are focusing on just on hardware integration or a specific type of battery. Some other, they are just focusing on different pieces of the technology and providing just analytics and not controls. Some other just focusing on optimization. I think that the real value that we bring, it is we do monitoring, optimization, and control of the battery. So we cover the full value chain in the battery space. And this, I think, it's a very compelling value proposition and differentiator point that we have. Second one is we have a physics informed approach. This is pretty technical. I'll try to be as simple as possible, but basically we understand, the physical equation and all the physical activities, let's say this way, happening within the battery. And then on top of this, we provide an additional layer of machine learning and AI that is basically combining information coming from different batteries all around the world, and also combining, different points. Can be temperature points, can be driving behavior, can be, whatever is the context around that specific batteries, and merging everything together and putting in a system basically the chemistries and the physical layer with all the other information, so to provide an outcome that is much more precise and that can help unlock additional value into the battery space. So this is a very good differentiator that we have. And the third one is basically we are hardware and chemistry agnostic. So the technology has been built in a way that can be deployed into any type of batteries and any type of verticals. So, we can scale into different segments, into different chemistries, into different application in a very easy way. So this is what makes us different from all the competition that are very vertical focus and not much horizontal focus.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, from your perspective, what's the core problem the market is dealing with today that when it comes to battery performance and intelligence?
Yeah, I think if you let me zoom out a little bit just about, something about why batteries are so important and are the backbone of the energy transition. Right now, what is happening is like a structural change. I would say it's like the energy field. We have, a lot of renewable coming in, solar, wind, other sources, they are abundant, they are clean, they are increasingly cost efficient if you look at, the data and all the information. But there is one, center issue that is they are intermittent by nature. So the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. And so you need something to store the excess energy when it's available. That one is batteries. So you have this infrastructure, this hardware that, can store this excess of energy. At the same time, and on another level, you have what is called in the industry the energy trilemma. You have sustainability, affordability, and security. That are very important elements in our current society, in our current political agenda and perspective. Mixing and matching, I would say, all of this together, you have a new ecosystem that is forming, and that needs, of course, an additional layer of optimization, and additional layer of complexity. So the real question is why battery is so important is how can we build energy systems that are clean, resilient, controllable, and secure? And the answer is hardware, battery hardware, a layer of technology. Why the layer of technology is needed on the hardware? Because battery alone is they're not enough. They need something that can help them to be controlled. I like it to see and to visualize it as the battery is a sort of, body. And then you have the brain that is actually controlling, of course, everything that is happening in your body. So you want to move, you want to release your energy, to, to make a step forward. Your brain is actually that power source that is telling you that you need to consume energy within you and make that step. The same is in the industry. Right now, we have a lot of batteries, but we have no basically, brain on top of them. So these assets are just positioned and working in a blind way. As the industry keep growing, and then as of course, we have sustainability as mentioned, we have affordability, we have energy security. We need more hardware, but we need intelligence to use and optimize this hardware in a very useful way. So that's why, of course, we're working on this specific value proposition. And this is the trend, what is happening in this wider energy space. And basically having this technological layer on top of the batteries, what this enables, it is basically having a very precise estimation of the energy that is within the battery, that is called in the industry state of charge. So you know how much energy exactly you have. This is converted, let's say this way, in plain English in different ways. It can be range if you're driving, a car, and it can be also availability of energy if you're using that batteries for different application. For instance, powering an hospital, or knowing exactly how much energy you have can have a very big difference from arriving to your destination, arriving to the next charging station, and powering the hospital. On the other side, you have state of health. That is basically what is the health of the batteries, and now it is degrading. And then you have also the value of remaining useful life. So it is how much longer you can move with your batteries. So all of this is information that you have in the monitoring capabilities, and that you need then to optimize as you optimize your health, as you optimize your energy, like, always considering that body example, you need to optimize your energy, you need to optimize your health, and you need to optimize how long, you can live in your life. And so you go into like, dynamically, these different dynamics, about, how can I change, the perspective, how I can charge the battery in a different way, as I can, discharge the battery in a different way, how can I extend, of course, the lifetime through less degradation and, preventing failure. So all of these optimizations capabilities until controlling, so acting specifically on the batteries and orchestrating, different energy system and providing of, again, longer asset life, better utilization, predictive safety, and so avoiding critical faults, fires. One of the biggest one has been like in Moss Landing in California for like a stationary storage application, but also like, I think a couple of months ago, there was some issue in South Korea that, stopped in the data centers that stop, of course, the operational and the administration in Korea for a while. So all of this, it's like, about being sure that the batteries are actually safe and that you can anticipate what is going to happen. And all of this, it's sort of, brain that you have that is like understanding and helping, into this.
Yeah, that's really amazing how you can understand and kind of track and monitor all those things. It's extremely helpful. So, as CMO, where are you spending most of your time right now?
So I think it's about trying to translate sometime, complex technical innovation into value proposition. It's like, there are a lot of pain points out there in the markets, and sometimes they're more known, let's say this way. Sometimes they're less known. Or then you need to understand, of course, the root cause of that specific issue. And so the focus that I have is in what we call like, product marketing. That is like basically trying to, yeah, adapt our value proposition, adjust better our value proposition to the specific use case and understand how much value we can provide. I think, we have a very strong focus and I brought this into the company about we need to pitch to the client the value that we can provide. So it's basically, like, what is the outcome? What is the ROI? What is the extension of life? Depends on the use case because different customers has different, needs, let's say this way. And also depends on the person or the people you're talking with. So if you're talking with like an engineer, it may be more focused on like, extending the life of the battery, understanding the root cause of an issue happening in the batteries. If you're talking with like a business person, maybe more interesting about how much ROI can I get out of this battery if I sell more energy, if I can access to like, that specific remaining energy that usually it's there. Let me give an example. Usually state of charge is one of the very important variable. Like battery are oversized usually and use less than what they should for like, avoiding issues. But usually you have a 10 to 20% more energy that you can squeeze out from your batteries. And this is like, can translate if used in the right way and if you have the right system that tells you how to do it, can translate into, 5 to 10% more ROI. So that's a lot of value that is like, unused and that we need to let the customers use instead so that you can also like, stopping overestimate plans. And so that is also like on the capital level, it's like, you can decrease the cost of investing in your renewable energy assets and so on and so forth. So it's basically like trying to adjust the value proposition and make clear what is the value that you can get. At the same time, it's about, branding and building the brand and like, showcasing to customers and investors what is the value that they're receiving and what is also like the level of trust and understanding that we provide. And all, of course, in the most compelling way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how do you take something as complex as AI-driven battery intelligence and make it resonate in a way that actually drives buying decisions?
Again, it's all about the audience that you're talking with. So like, it's about adjusting to the specific audience and trying to, to speak the same language that that audience is speaking. If it is an engineer, you need to provide technical details. If it is a business person, you need to provide different details. If it is like a financial like department, you need to provide numbers and like ROIs numbers and so on and so forth. So we do a lot of customization in this, a lot of adjustments, just to be as much as compelling career as possible with the specific audience. At the same time, we like in our strategy, we have of course like specific layers of value that we want to transmit, and a specific set of strategies and directions. For instance, be very much outcome driven. That is for sure one. Trying to leverage, of course, the technicalities with a simpler communication. So it's like try to balance all of these different levels that we have, but be specific with the audience that we have.
Absolutely. So, who do you serve best? What's a ideal customer profile that converts fastest and sees the most value?
So in the different verticals, they can be a little bit different. I would say that in case of the mobility, that is one of the verticals that we cover. We work very well with tier one suppliers that are basically those companies providing all the assets, let's say this way, that can be then deployed into the vehicles through the vehicle OEMs, so the car makers. So they provide all the infrastructural asset that then will be deployed into vehicles. In case of energy players, I would say it is like the system integrators at the company then of providing all the assets. So it's similar. It is tier one suppliers in the energy fields, and also like integrating our technology, of course, within the plant. And then in case of wider space, that can be more robotics and fleet management. It is directly the fleet operators that they need, of course, additional insights on how they can monetize more on their assets. So this is like the ICPs that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So, what would you say has been your biggest challenge this year in building awareness and demand in a category that requires significant marketing education?
Yeah, I think that's basically it. It is like a completely new category that we are defining right now. So it's always like you do not have like a lot of reference points. So being so new, not being like one side it's good. There is like not a lot of competitors, not a lot of other companies doing what we are doing in the way that we're doing it. On the other side, of course, it's difficult to compare yourself against something that is not there. So it's like, sometimes you have a lot of testing that you need to do, a lot of, things that needs to be tried out, see how it works, and then be very specific about focusing on the impact of the actions that you do. It's like, if something works and gives you an impact, is basically, trying to scale on that. And so trying to operationalize as much as possible and scale on top of that. There is a lot of brand awareness for sure about, especially a lot of education to be done to different audience. For instance, investors is one of the audience that needs to be educated and that need also to be helped into like connecting the dots about, the technological layers and all the wider ecosystem. It's a very, complicated topics in general. So it needs, some additional layers of understanding in that space. But yeah, I think there is a lot of testing to be done, and knowing I think the energy market, knowing the dynamics of it helps a lot into navigating, of course, the different players that are out there and the different needs that they have. So it's about listening to again to the customers, listening to the markets, but also like matching it with the trends and trying to be as also forward looking as possible. It's not only right now, but it's also like in 5 to 10 years the situation will be completely different. So it's also being like in a way being visionary and being ahead, and so trying to also pitch always the big pictures, the big vision.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what does success look like over the next year from a marketing and revenue standpoint?
So we are growing big time right now as a company. So we are expanding our customer base in different locations. Right now we are like in United States, Europe, India, South Korea, Taiwan, and also expanding in the Middle East. So I would say that we have some specific region like Middle East that is a new one that needs to be developed much more, and also like Eastern Asia region that is definitely growing a lot, very very interesting, and also adjusting to some, I would say, and we are already on top of that. Let's say regulatory value propositions. So right now, for instance, in Europe, there is like the battery passport coming out in 2027. So basically, every battery needs to have like a digital record from where the materials were sourced until the recycling phase. And of course, in between, there is all the performance and state indicators and optimization of the batteries where we can, fit in. This regulation is quite important, I would say, and other countries are like following right now, because basically every battery that you need to solve in the European Union needs to have this, digital record, digital certification. So basically, it's going to be a lot happening in this space. So there is a lot of, of work to be done to be compelling into these, new regulatory fields that are happening as we speak, new safety fields that are happening as we speak. And so a lot of, new changes. We need to be very agile. And to this, at the same time, in terms of marketing and communication, is like being agile into positioning ourselves better and better. And in again, like trying to understand what is a real trend and distill the value out of it, and what is just something that is temporary, and so not worth of a lot of focus, I would say.
Absolutely. I'm sure, the various regulations in different markets certainly add a layer of challenges. Are you in the US market currently?
Yes, they were main
Gotcha.
mark.
That's the main market. Fantastic. And what would you say are trends you're seeing in AI and electrification that are real versus hype right now?
So I think there's going to be a lot about the especially of course focusing on the energy fields. There's going to be a lot about agentic AI in a way. So the trend is, I think it's real about having the batteries basically not operated, let's say this way, by a human operator, but having, like specific actions that are performed on the base of an algorithm of the model in order to optimize the profile that the customer wants. So basically, right now, what is still happening, it is like we have our algorithms, but then the control at the end, you need to have like a person pushing a button to make that happen. What I'm seeing as a trend is like transformation of this, at least for like, the 80% of the operations into like, directly conversion into the control from the algorithm. So you have like, the analysis, let's say this way, the action suggested by the algorithm and the action, happening directly after that. So this will eliminate, a lot of delays, a lot of, also safety issue that are happening. Of course, you need rules, you need regulations, you need specific, settings according again to the profile. So if you want to, let's say, maximize the value, the life of the battery, you have specific actions that need to be performed. If you want to customize, the ROI, you need other actions to be performed. This is something that I see it is happening. On the other side, there is like a very, again, we are tapping this connection between the physical world with the cloud world. So in some cases, you need to have additional devices, IoT devices connected with the batteries that perform specific actions, control on the batteries. But what I see it is like, the link between the cloud and the real world. So like, physical world and the cloud world is becoming much more important, and a lot of players are moving also in this direction. So like stopping to have servers and to have directly computers close to the power plants, but like using the cloud as the infrastructure to where the data are, and like and collecting more and more data. This becomes a good perspective, and also provides the opportunity to use those data into a different way, so to basically create new value proposition out of enormous amount of data that is out there and not yet used. Let me give an example. We have right now 1.4 billions of data points that we use for our algorithms and our models train on. I envision this will like, as we scale and we grow and more customers are, providing data and stuff, of course, in an anonymized way and like following all regulations, this will scale a lot, big time. And so, all of this will give like an additional layer of opportunity to create new value out of those data and optimize even more the capabilities. And last but not least, what I see it is like a complete decentralization of the energy infrastructure. Right now, we still rely very much on like, big power plant transmission, and then of course all the smaller grids. What I see it is like, especially with like the renewable growing in a geopolitical situation, what I envision it is like having small set of like, independent grid systems. So it can be, microgrids, virtual power plant, and all of these in this fashion that will grow. So having like sort of specific subnet, subgrid that are, working all together, perhaps in a federated way. And so having like a sort of, big virtual power plant or energy community, as it is called in Europe, as a system that is decentralized. And that can be, of course, much more secure, much more safe if you have like, specific, let's say, hacker attacks, or also like, uh, war situation, or like, shutdown situation, or like, uh, weather situation that are ongoing. But at the same time, you have much more reliability in the system, and everything can be produced locally. So the energy can be produced and used locally, and so also being much more sustainable.
Absolutely. So, if we were to have this conversation again in 12 months, what would need to happen for you to feel like it was a big win for the company?
I think in terms of big win for the company is like, having established our brand even more and grow, of course, our growth base, our base sorry, of customers, and like, be present in more markets. I think this is like, what matters for us right now. So to build our technology to how many customers as possible, while also supporting, of course, this wider trend of the energy transition. So matching together, I would say, economic value for like, different stakeholders, but also for like, increasing the sustainability in general.
It's fantastic. Well, that's it for today's episode of AI Speed. A huge thank you to Giovanni Rossi for sharing his invaluable insights and how Electra Vehicles is transforming batteries into intelligent systems and driving the future of electrification with AI. If you're building or leading an AI native company or a service business that uses AI under the hood, and you care about revenue, adoption, and market share, make sure to subscribe to AI Speed. Learn how the best AI operators ship faster, sell smarter, and stay ahead. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep building, keep selling, and keep moving at AI speed.